Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second stakeholder meeting on the newly passed legislation as a result of Assembly Bill 130 that's going to provide an additional $490 million for the full day kindergarten facilities program. We also, as we discussed last time, the new provisions of the law have created two new types of facilities as well. In addition to full day kindergarten, we can now provide funding for full day preschool and transitional kindergarten. So it's opening up quite a bit. Those of you that weren't around for the first meeting was recorded and put onto our OPSC YouTube page. It's OPSCU, YOU. This meeting will also be archived there. And you can find the materials for today's meeting at our website, at the OPSC website under meetings. I think we'll also probably drop it into the chat at some point, but you should be able to find it there. Just a couple weeks ago, we had our first meeting and introduced some of the ideas that are put forth in the statute. We had an early version of our regulations that we're proposing for the programs. And we really generated some great discussion. We got a lot of really good input. I wanted to thank everybody who attended the meeting and also those of you that provided us some input. Some of you even took some time out of your schedules to meet with us afterwards, and it was extremely helpful. We were able to get a whole bunch of really good information, and we've taken that all to account, and we've kind of recompiled where we're at for the programs in this item. So before we get too much into it, I want to just kind of give you a preview of kind of what's coming up and what our schedule is going to be like. So we're having our meeting today. We plan on having a third meeting that's scheduled right now for Wednesday, October the 12th. And then at that meeting, we're going to be presenting what I think will be a little bit more of a final version of what we anticipate on taking forward to the state allocation board. So this meeting, there's a few topics that are left open that we want to explore a bit further. And then we're hoping to finalize at our final meeting that's scheduled for the 12th. So today, we're going to kind of briefly recap where we were after last meeting. For those of you that are hearing this for the first time, you'll get a little bit of a preview of what the new changes are. And then we wanted to open it up for just some discussion about some of the topics that we think still need just a little bit more discussion and some time to kind of figure out exactly what we want to do, a little bit on the details of those things. Namely, we're going to be looking at how to determine the number of eligible classrooms in these projects. The best way to predict enrollment for these lower grade levels, especially because they're relatively new. Transitional kindergarten, I think now is actually a grade level for the first time, and we have preschool, and we're not used to providing enrollment predictions for those grade levels. So we have some ideas on how to do that. We're going to also discuss limitations on reimbursements for projects that may have already been completed or underway. And then we wanted to explore the preschool and transitional kindergarten center concept. So we're talking about a centralized site or maybe even multiple sites that are going to be kind of a central point for those kids to be housed. And then also, we wanted to also discuss some of the program limitations that we think are important. We want to make sure that we're striking the balance between providing enough grants to make a difference for these programs, but at the same time, not allocating the limited funds that we have to only just a few projects. So we're looking to kind of see where that sweet spot is so that we can achieve both of those things. So I'm going to turn this over to Lindsay. Lindsay Gordon is the primary analyst for the program. She's going to walk you through the item and the regulations. We also have a new aspect today that we didn't have last time. We are bringing forward some draft changes to the program forms. I mean, really, these just follow the changes that we're making. The discussions we're having and the regulations that we're providing the forms will follow suit. They're not going to be anything unique to the forms that aren't in the regulations and so forth. But we wanted to give you a preview of that. And then when Lindsay is finished, you'll have an opportunity to unmute and ask any questions that you might have, get some discussion going. And if you feel more comfortable, you can always put your questions or comments in the chat, and we'll read those out loud and answer. We're going to try to answer every one of them. If we run out of time, Hopefully we won't, but we'll try to get to everybody's questions. And then we're always, of course, available after the meeting for any kind of discussions or to send us comments. And we'll go into that a little bit more once Lindsay is finished. So with that, I will turn it over to Lindsay. Please enjoy. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I will go ahead and share my screen to show the current packet that we have that is available on our website and was sent out as well. All right. Everyone can see that okay? Yeah, okay. Okay, so as Brian said, today we will be reviewing questions and input that has been received since the first public meeting that we held on September 8th. So we will continue to discuss some of the new program changes for the California Preschool Transitional Kindergarten and Full Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant Program. A little description for those that maybe did not attend the last meeting. So a review of the new program, the Assembly Bill 130 amended Ed Code Section 17375 and allocated an additional $490 million. And this addition amended the program eligibility and funding criteria, and now allows for school districts to apply for program funding for school sites that are lacking appropriate facilities to provide for existing or future full day preschool, TK, and kinder pupils. So school districts may construct new facilities or retrofit existing facilities to meet Title V kindergarten requirements. So again, as Brian mentioned at that first stakeholder meeting, we discussed the proposed criteria to effectively determine eligibility and funding of projects that will apply for program funding. So questions that were asked and answered during that meeting can be found in attachment F of this packet. And questions or input that's been received since that meeting, or maybe some questions or thoughts that needed more discussion, are going to be addressed in this item. So we'll start with some of our first questions. So the first question, how will OPSC determine the number of classrooms a school district is eligible for transitional kindergarten and preschool pupils? And what will be needed to provide, what will we need to provide to substantiate that enrollment? So OPSC is continuing to discuss with the California Department of Social Services and the Department of Education on the best practice for predicting enrollment for these programs. So with these discussions, it appears that there's not an accurate way to predict enrollment for preschool or TK. And it appears that an average of actual enrollment would be the most accurate way to predict enrollment for these programs. So OPSC staff is proposing that if a school is trying to determine the enrollment for a new TK or preschool program, enrollment for those school sites, first, second, and third grade, will be used to help indicate the number of classrooms needed to house those pupils. So this methodology would assume that all first grade at the site were eligible for TK 2 years prior. And then all current second graders were eligible 3 years prior, and third graders were eligible 4 years prior. So by averaging these 3 grades by using actual enrollment at the site, this will help address the implementation of TK based on birth month. So just an example of this is we would take, if a school site had 70 first grade pupils in the current year that you're applying, 65 second grade pupils, and 75 third grade pupils, we take that 3-year average for 70 pupils, and that school site would be eligible for 3 classrooms, as we base it on the 25 loading standard for each classroom. So the next few questions. So what is OPSC using the 3 years of prior enrollment for? So in statute, it states that school districts applying for the program will submit the current enrollment year and the 3 immediately preceding enrollment years. So OPSC is going to use this enrollment to determine a pattern and the facility usage at the site and see if that project should be limited to retrofit funding. So an example of this would be if a school site has had, declining enrollment and they have the equivalent of 2 empty classrooms available on the site, and those classrooms are near or adjacent to that kindergarten complex, then that project may be limited to retrofit funding. OPSC will work closely with CDE to determine the best way to implement that, and it'll be mainly a case-by-case basis. So the next question, would a community college district that provides a certified child care center or preschool be eligible for program funding? And unfortunately, no, they would not be eligible. Ed Code Section 80 defines any school district and all school districts to mean school districts of every kind or class except a community college. Additionally, community college were not explicitly stated in statute, so they would not be eligible for funding. So does the site have to have or qualify for SFP modernization eligibility to be eligible for program funding? And the answer is no. This program does not use SFP mod eligibility for the retrofit projects. Retrofit projects are intended to include the possibility of adding extra square footage to appropriately meet Title V requirements of that 1350 square foot per kindergarten classroom. Additionally, the retrofitting of any classroom in this project would not redate any facilities for the purpose of SFP modernization eligibility. So can a district apply for a project on a new site or in a vacant school to establish a centralized site to provide preschool or transitional kindergarten? So yes, this would be permissible use of the program funding, as Brian mentioned as well. And since the program has been allotted the $490 million, it would be eligible. And so based on the number of applications that were received in the first 2 rounds, we appear that this new program could be oversubscribed. And so therefore, we are looking for a way to balance this appropriately. And we'll discuss it a little bit more when we talk about the regional preschool centers. So the next question, does my project need to be a full day facility, or can it be part day if it's for preschool or TK? So in Ed section 17375 M1, it states that kindergarten, which includes transitional kindergarten as defined in Ed Code section 48,000 is full day, and Ed Code section 17375 M3 defined preschool program as meaning a full day program. So we interpret this as if preschool is required to be full day and full day kindergarten is required to be full day, then it would be logical that that transitional, that middle program is full day as well. And also, if a district is choosing to have full day programs, they can still offer half day programs if they need. Those classrooms would just not be eligible for the program. So some updates and changes that we have made to the regulations since our last meeting. We identified that resolutions for the full day kindergarten instruction, those must be submitted, and full day kindergarten must be implemented in the enrollment year after the completion of the project. So that's been added into our regulations. We also clarified in regulations that preschool, TK, and kindergarten must be full day programs. So you'll see in this packet that the regulations have been included, and changes that have been made since the last meeting have been highlighted. And we will go over those as well as we move through. Some new items are the forms, which we will talk about as well. We have some updates to the 7001, 7002, and 7003, and we'll go over those in just a moment. So to discuss some more of the program criteria and things that we would like some more discussion on is the regional preschool or TK centers. So for a regional preschool center, OPSC is proposing that there's a limit of how many classrooms can be requested for program funding for either preschool or TK programs on a regional center site. And regional centers would draw from enrollment from multiple sites. So like if a district does not have a preschool or transitional kindergarten maybe at every school site, then OPSC would request enrollment information for that 1st through 3rd grade for the sites that will receive students. So kind of similar to a feeder school concept in the way that we do in SFP new construction. We'd use that same concept with the regional preschool centers. And since the first 2 rounds of this program were oversubscribed, it did result in only 1 site from each school district receiving funding. So OPSC is proposing that a limit on classrooms so that program funding is balanced throughout all applicants. We're proposing that a 4 classroom cap for the preschool and TK programs. Now, we would not put a cap on full day classrooms as those are based on the current lack of facilities and the current kindergarten enrollment at a site. So we would not have the full day kindergarten classrooms capped. We also have a chart here that shows the number of classrooms that were requested by applications that were funded from the first 2 rounds. So you can see it's a pretty big range. And so we don't want to necessarily cap that because some sites do have that need for the real large projects. OPSC is still continuing to do some research on the free and reduced price meal based on some concerns that were brought up in the last meeting. And for preschool loading capacity, we are proposing that each preschool classroom is loaded at 25 for the funding purposes. And this is in reflection of how the kindergarten classrooms and TK classrooms will be funded based by those 25. And additionally, we did mention this in the last stakeholder meeting, but want to remind you that additionally, school districts must build facilities that are not less than that 1,350 square feet, which is Title V compliant for kindergarten classrooms. By doing this, it ensures the prudent use of the state funding by creating flexibility for school districts in the future. So if they are doing preschool classrooms now at 1,350 and in the future don't have preschool pupils, they may use that classroom effectively for kindergarten or TK. So we'll go through the attachments. We have our attachment A is our authority, so the ed code and different sections that we are using to determine our regulations. Let's see, so we'll go to the regulations, which will be page 20 with our first changes since the last meeting. Page 20 of the packet, excuse me. So section 1860.51 is the eligibility criteria for the transitional kindergarten. In this section, we have included more information in the language to calculate the average pupils, as we discussed with the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade enrollment based on the time of submittal. So we've added more information here and regulations on how that would be done. And then on page 21 of your packet, section 1860.52 is the California State Preschool Program eligibility criteria. And again, we've added the information and language on the determining enrollment and classrooms that you could be eligible for a classroom, for a preschool project at a classroom. And if you go to page 22 of the packet, or section 1860.7 with application types. We have 2 options in here for, as we discussed, with occupancy and reimbursements. So we're looking for a discussion on what would possibly be best if the board shall provide funding based on the date of occupancy for new construction projects and retrofit projects for the kindergarten, preschool, and TK programs, or for if we should be doing construction contracts for these projects if the construction projects were signed on July 1st of 2021 or later. Additionally, we've added that if an advanced fund release is requested from the program, then when a district has received all of their plan approvals for DSA or CDE and they're ready to come back in for the full funding of their program, they will submit an updated 7001 that includes all the appropriate information on there with contract dates, CDE, approval letter date, DSA letter, and DSA number. So if we go to page 33 of the packet, this is where we have the changes to the 7001, which is the application for funding. Some big changes that were here are just adding in the correct titles for the program, as well as who our references are, like in specific instructions. OPSC will be working with Department of Social Services as well as Department of Education and DSA. We've also included, as we've discussed, that for preschool programs, they must include in their application submittal the county's most recent child care needs assessment, as well as the current or future contract with the Department of Education, as well as the enrollment for the current and 3 immediately preceding years at the school site. So those are the biggest changes in the instructions of the 7001, as well as instead of CBEDS, so we will be requesting CalPADS, the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, instead of CBEDS. So as you can see on our form, there's a few changes. Up in the header section, we've added checkboxes for which 7001 you are submitting. So at the beginning of the program, you will submit that, you'll check that first box, which is the initial 7001 for the advance. And when the district comes back in for that full funding and submits that updated 7001, they will check that second box to let us know which one they're submitting. Additionally, here's where you can also enter on section 2, the enrollment data for the proposed site. So you would enter in preschool through 12th grade as applicable for the current and 3 previous years. Section 3, we have added sections and checkboxes for how many pupils you are requesting for each program. So if you are doing multiple projects at the site, you may enter in the amount of kindergarten, preschool, or TK pupils you're requesting in increments of 25, and then the number of classrooms that are associated with that project. And in section 3F, we've also included the Department of Social Services plan approval letter, if this is applicable, and this is where you would enter in that recommended site size, existing acres, and proposed acres, just the way that you would do with a CDE letter. And then another change in the last page of the 7001 is checkboxes for the resolution of either a TK or preschool program, as well as with preschool programs, checking off that the child care needs assessment is included and that contract with CDE is also included. So the form 7002, which is the fund release authorization form, is on page 39 of the packet. Really, the only big changes here are making sure that the program is appropriately labeled. So California Preschool, Transitional Kindergarten, and Full Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant Program. There aren't any changes that were added here except for including that Department of Social Services approval letter date. And then the expenditure report, which is the form 7003, it's the same as 7002. We've only added as needed the labels for the correct program and changing the date of revision. Outside of that, it's basically the same as it's been. So the last few pages, so starting on page 43, you can see attachment F that discusses the questions and answers that were discussed in the previous stakeholder meeting. And so feel free to review that at your own time. I believe that's all I have for that. If we can answer any questions.
That was fast. We can go back to the individual pages, section by section, and spend more time on any questions we have on individual changes and recommendations we have in here too as well.
See, the first question we have is the board resolution that's required to participate in the program. Is it going to be different than the wording used in rounds 1 and 2?
I can go ahead and answer that. Couple quick things to clarify on that. There is some specific language in the statute that advises based on the application for funding program type when that resolution is required. So currently with the full day kindergarten program, if you're submitting an application for that, that resolution may follow. It does not have to be included at the time of application submittal, but it must be submitted by the time of the project completion. Further, we did elaborate, as Leslie pointed to identify that that language in there just has to indicate that the implementation of that program must be the immediate next following school year after the project completion. For preschool and transitional kindergarten, the statute specifically says that the resolution must be included with the application for funding. And so again, I believe that we are still okay with the idea of the language indicating that the implementation of the program would start the immediate following school year after the project completion.
Thank you, Josh. Rebecca, your hand's up. You have a question?
I think you're muted, Rebecca.
Rebecca, you need to unmute. Thank you.
Sorry, you'd think by
That's
now
okay.
we'd know how to do this. I wanted to speak to the occupancy versus construction contracts question that you posed. That was something that we had raised as a question was, how to calculate that occupancy, especially as it may pertain to retrofit projects. So we liked the option that you provided of going by construction contract as of July 2021 instead of using the occupancy date. So I think it was helpful, Lindsay, that you clarified that those were two options that you're looking at which one to go with, if I understood correctly. In particular, I like the construction contract for two reasons. One, we were trying to wrap our brains around how occupancy would work for retrofit projects, since those are classrooms where you've got kids in them. The kids are presumably going to vacate the classrooms during the project and then come back, but we weren't quite sure when that date of occupancy, how that would apply to retrofit projects. And then also, since this is a program with application cycles, occupancy feels a little dicey. Like you'd have to time the occupancy of your classroom based on when you may be able to submit that application in the round in that 1 month time period. So we definitely like the construction contracts approach better. I just think it's cleaner and it makes more sense for the types of facilities that we're talking about. The other thing that I wanted to say is I just wanted to thank you all very, very much for your hard work on this. I know a lot has gone into it. I appreciate the time and attention that you've taken and your willingness to meet with us and to listen. And I think that you've got a product that's really going in the right direction. And I just really appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great to hear. Thank you very much. And thanks for your help as well. It's been invaluable help. Thank you. Okay, so let's see. We can definitely talk about that a little bit more, and we'll touch base with you, Rebecca, offline, and also we'll evaluate this a little bit more before our final proposal at the next meeting. Next question we have is from Joe Hernandez in Dinuba. Hello, Joe. Good morning. He asks, so you must have full day kindergarten programs to be eligible for funding. So yes, well, yes and no, I suppose. The program is to provide full day. So if you're transitioning over to have full day programs, that's what this program is for. Or if you have a full day program, but you don't have the facilities that you need to properly implement those programs. So that's really what that's for. Josh, if you wanted to jump in here, if I missed anything, I think that's basically the answer is that they need to be full day once the project is completed. But whether or not you have one currently is dependent on the type of project you would apply for.
Correct. Yeah. Just to kind of add on what Brian was saying, yes, there are two different scenarios in which you could apply for the funding when it comes to the full day kindergarten. For full day kindergarten, you have one option, which would be if you are converting from a part day to a full day. that would be an eligible project scope. In that case, we would still use the enrollment that you currently have for your kindergarten to establish how many classrooms do you need based on how many you currently have that are already kindergarten compliant facilities. Those specific projects, when you're converting from a part day to a full day or instituting a full day program, would be the 75-25 split as aligned in statute. If you currently have a full day program, but maybe you just lack the actual kindergarten classrooms necessary for those pupils, those would be a 50-50 or 60-40 split based on a new construction or retrofit project. So still eligible, but a different split because it's not a conversion project.
Thank you. Hope that answered your question, Joe.
Yes,
Thank you. Our next question is from Ilana. Good morning, Ilana. She's asking if we could clarify the classroom cap of 4 classrooms.
Yeah, to kind of go on to the building of the chart that Lindsay demonstrated. So we used some of the previous funding circumstances to look at how many classrooms are typically being funded under these programs. And you can see that the large majority of them were under 4 classrooms. As Brian kind of alluded to in the beginning, we want to make sure that we're trying to be as fair in the spreading of the funding and not kind of let single projects or maybe just a handful of projects tie up the funding. We do know that $490 million seems like a pretty good amount of money, but it can go super quick with large projects. And because we're using a kind of projected enrollment concept, doing that 3-year average, we don't want to tie up too much funding on small or on big projects for just a few number of districts. So we were proposing the 4 classroom limit for each of the grade levels. So keep in mind that includes that if you're doing a preschool project and a transitional project, you could get 4 classrooms for each of those grade levels for a total of 8. And then because the statute specifically says for the full day kindergarten that is to provide the facilities that they lack for the current enrollment, we do not feel that there should be a cap on that. So I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit on where we were going with that idea.
Yeah, so no cap on FTK, but the 4 classroom cap on each of the preschool and transitional kindergarten. Okay.
It also ties to what we think we can allow regional centers to. We had that question in the first meeting. So if one district applies for a regional center and that's your one project that's funded under the program, there's potential that if you have multiple schools feeding into that regional center, it could be a really large project that could tie up a lot of FTK money all at once by one school district for one project. And we know under the prior rounds, you know, with the oversubscription, most districts got one school site project funded and that was it. And then we kept going around down the list. So we wanted to try to avoid that as well.
Yeah. So Ilana's follow-up question, would the cap apply to a district-wide center? Yes, it would. I think we're saying for any project, whether a center, a center concept project at a new site or a centralized site, or at just a specific school site. I see somebody else with their hand up that doesn't say the name, but go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, sorry about that. Hey, Brian, it's Matt Petler with School Facility Consultants. Hope you're doing well.
Hey, Matt, good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to first echo Rebecca's comments and thanking you all for the presentation and listening to the stakeholder feedback. I think a lot of the items have been incorporated in this version. So really, again, appreciate that and all your work on this, everyone at OPSC. I had a quick question. Lindsay, when she was going through the Q&A and talking about the preschool requirements and the square footage requirements, I get the concept of building those to the standard of kindergarten to have flexibility so that they could be used as program changes for either preschool or kindergarten. But my comment would be to stay away from the square footage number, the 1350, and go towards Title V compliance for kindergarten. I think that's what the statute says and where we are on the kindergarten facilities. 1350 is the recommendation, but CDE recognizes some variance from that in terms of being Title V compliant. So that was just my comment. If we could maybe be consistent with Title V compliant as opposed to a square footage requirement. Thank you.
So Matt, maybe I think we in the Q&A we didn't speak to square footage, but I think in the regs we spelled out specifically 1350. So Title V for preschool as it relates to kindergarten size versus preschool. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think, Michael, my thought was for all of these facilities, referencing Title V requirements for kindergarten. And then CDE has to approve all these projects, and then they make the determination that they are Title V compliant.
Gotcha. Because I think Title V for preschool is smaller, right?
Yeah, it
It's
is.
based on-
And so I get that. Yeah, so I get the concept that you want the preschool facilities to be Title V compliant for kindergarten, I think is what you're saying in the write-up. But if we could stay away from the 1350 and instead use, kindergarten Title V compliant as language and requirement, and then CDE does their review and their approval, ensuring that it meets the Title V requirements.
Gotcha.
Thanks, Matt. That's helpful. We'll definitely look into that. We had been talking about that too. We were discussing that internally. So that added information is very helpful. Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else with any questions? There's a lot of info here. I know it's a lot to digest. Oh, Janet, yes, please. Go right ahead.
I have a question. If we're working with a client that has a preschool program, but they're importables that are licensed, preschool licensed by the Department of Social Services, but were built or put in service in the 1960s. They're very, very old. Would those be eligible to be replaced?
So I can answer that if you don't mind real quick. A lot of that would actually depend on the independent circumstances. And I say this because when we're looking at capacity usage to determine whether a project would be limited to retrofit funding or not, we have to look at, in partnership with CDE, to find out, were the facilities considered that Title V compliance at the time they were constructed? Did they meet the requirements then? So that would be the circumstance we'd have to know for sure before we could move forward on that determination. One of the specific things in the program itself would be if there is a retrofit, we do actually have some specific provisions in that a retrofit project cannot demolish the classroom. So that is one other consideration to look at. But again, we'd really need more specific details on that site. And obviously a district can submit the application based off a new construction funding request. And when we process the application, we would get into those nuanced details to determine what the eligibility for program funding would be.
Also, if I can add on that, for a licensed program, if it's on a school district site and ran by the school district, then it would be eligible. But if it is a third party run, but it is on a school district site, then it technically would not be eligible because it must be school district run.
Another great question. Thank you, Janet.
Hey, Brian, I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Greg. Good morning.
Good morning. A suggestion on the free and reduce. At the previous meeting, there was some concern based upon the fact that free and reduce is being offered to all students, and that may skew the numbers. So my suggestion would be, as we have addressed the enrollment issue by going back and utilizing 1920 data, may I suggest that we use the 1920 data for the free and reduced? That way it would not be skewed.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's something that we had considered. And I think our item said we're still gathering information on that, but that's certainly on the table. And it's definitely something that we have talked about. So good to hear your input on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. It is, like Brian said, something we have been looking at. It was a point that was brought up at the last meeting. I know there was also some other suggestions on maybe using an alternative data source. One thing we are restricted to is the statute specifically says we do need to look at the FRPM. So based on the statute, we are kind of limited to what we can utilize for that, but that is a good idea in looking at some of the other aspects we can apply that in. So we have been internally discussing that and appreciate the feedback of other people thinking along those same lines.
Anyone else with any comments or questions? Going to hang in there for a few more minutes just to make sure we're covering them all. But like I said earlier, if there's anything that you'd like to discuss with us after the meeting or something that occurs to you later on, we're definitely available. We would like to receive feedback, I think by help me out with this, guys, I think it was the end of next week. I think we were hoping to get information sometime this week or next week, so that we can incorporate it into the item for the third meeting. But we're definitely open to it. And you know, any thoughts or ideas you have, we'd welcome to hear those, and would appreciate them very much.
I think
Also, oh, go ahead.
I was going to just remind you, I think the date is September 27th for the feedback.
This is 27th. Okay, thanks, Lisa.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
that would be helpful. We did get some information kind of late in the week last week. We did try to incorporate that. We just have, you know, the items take some time to generate and make sure that we have all of our I's dotted and our T's crossed, so to speak. Not just with the item itself, but with all the other things we have to do to publish them. So appreciate your help very much with those timelines. If you signed up to this event through Eventbrite, you should get a survey. Are we doing a survey for this one?
No, not this one.
Sorry. Sorry, wrong meeting. Okay, anybody else with some questions?
It does look like we have
Brian,
another question. Yeah, we do have another
two more in
question
the
in the chat. Alana Cunningham has asked, is the FRPM based on site or district-wide? The FRPM, similar to the financial hardship status for qualification of priority of funding of the applications, is based on the district-wide.
And then CDE clarified, and I think it kind of reconfirms what Matt was saying also about Title V being compliant. So we could take a look at the regs instead of specifying 1350 that, you know, potentially if you're building a preschool classroom, it must be Title V compliant for the size appropriate for a kindergarten classroom or something to that effect, without specifying the number. That way there's some flexibility into there. So we'll take a look at that and bring that back for the next meeting.
Hi, everyone. This is Matt again. I had a kind of a clarification, I guess. The discussion about the using the contract date or occupancy kind of as the gate of entry into the program, is that because there's you know only the 490 million to kind of limit the number of projects that are eligible, or is there another thought behind that? It comes to mind, you know, especially for full day kindergarten classrooms. We had pre-existing programs, as was referenced. There were a lot of projects that weren't able to be funded under that program because they didn't, you know, have enough points or you know, primarily weren't financial hardship. And some of the districts moved forward with those projects and, you know, would be eligible, I think, under kind of all the other items. So just wanted some thoughts on that piece. Thank you.
Definitely, thank you, Matt. That is a point that has been discussed a little bit, and obviously you can tell we're still kind of, you know, looking for more of that feedback and input as we move forward with the direction for where we need that line. The statute didn't, you know, necessarily speak to reimbursements on the projects. However, with the inception or inclusion of the preschool as well as the transitional kindergarten, it completely kind of routes the program out. And so our thought process behind that was that up until the point that the funding was available or that the statute was actually enacted, there wasn't a program to receive that funding for. And so we're kind of looking at it from that lens, but definitely would still appreciate any insight to projects that you may have and where those kind of align, and I would like to discuss those further with you for sure.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate that perspective. I think you could perhaps argue, and I understand that there's not, you know, the 490 million isn't, you know, is an issue as well in terms of the amount of money. But I think you could make an argument that the full day kindergarten aspects of the program are largely, you know, unchanged, and that this program added in the preschool and the transitional. You know, so anyway, just a thought. I think it's really kind of what the intent is in terms of where you want to focus the dollars.
Thank you, Matt. Right. Well, I'm seeing no more questions at this time. If you don't have any more questions, you know, we are going to, like I said, we're going to post this to our YouTube page. You can go back and look at the details. If you're looking over the item later on and have any questions, let us know. And we do plan on having our next meeting coming up here on
Next meeting on October 12th just to kind of reiterate too, also please, if at all possible, any other things you'd like to discuss or any other questions you have or some ideas, please do not hesitate to send those over to us. Call us if you would like to do a meeting to discuss them further. We are looking to try and have as much of that information as possible by next Wednesday, the 27th. That would still give us time to look at maybe some incorporations and kind of review and further discuss those items on how we can implement, or if we can at all possible, implement into the program write-up. So please do not hesitate to contact us. That would include myself, Lindsay, Brian, again, email, phone call, whatever is the best way for you to get that over to us.
Do we have a time for that October 12th meeting? I think we're doing 10 a.m. Yeah, I believe it's 10 a.m. Question in chat about what time it was. Yeah, it's from 10 to 12, Steve. And we'll have that posted on our website as usual, and we'll be sending out information on that as well. Okay, seeing no more questions, we'll hang around for a few more minutes, but I think that we've addressed all the questions that we had today. Thank you very much for your time this morning, and for all the nice comments and all the information that was given. We appreciate it very much, and we look forward to seeing all of you guys very soon. Thank you.